And good evening and Happy New Year, everyone. This is Trolling with Logic for the 11th of January 2014. We're a weekly secular and skeptic show broadcasting here. We're back on Vaughan as well for good, because just better here. I think that's the length of it. Just to let everyone know, you can call in at any time at the Skype contact Trolling with Logic. Send me a quick PM, give me the gist of your question, and we'll add you in due course. Also, if you do call in, bear in mind this show is recorded for later uploading, so you grant us permission to use your likeness. So no funny stuff with the DMCAs later. Also, the recording of this show is public domain, so please feel free to copy, share, spread it around, as long as you link back to us, just any of the links down below us. And so, very quickly introduce the panel, and Michael, Happy New Year to you, or Kitch, keep in.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year, everybody. And let's hope for a great 2014 filled with laughs and downs as well. So that's
all right. And Sheila, how are you doing? Happy New Year to you as well.
Oh, Happy New Year to all of you. I'm doing great. Glad to be back for another year.
And Marty, Happy New Year to you and welcome back.
Yeah, same to you.
No, I'm not going to say it.
Hi, everyone.
Don't worry, I'll try not to say it in this show. All right, Marty, we'll let you introduce the special guest. You have a nice little introduction awaiting.
Yeah, well, last time he was here, we introduced him as the asshole from Texas. So, well, here he is, the asshole from Texas, Matt Dillahunty.
Hey. So, as always, Sheila, you can start off with the introductory questions.
Okay, I'm pretty sure at this point pretty much everyone knows who you are and what you do, but for the rare few that don't, I guess, how did you happen to come into doing this sort of thing?
Yeah, the short version is that I was active in the church for 25 years throughout my entire life. I worked in the tech industry. There was a period of time where I lost my job, and everybody, I had thought that God wanted me to be a preacher, and so did some other people. So I spent some time studying with that end goal in mind, and it backfired spectacularly. Ended up no longer being a Christian, and then later identifying as an atheist. Took about probably about a 1.5 to 2 year period of this kind of falling away, but it happened really rapidly towards the end. And I live in Austin, Texas, and there's a public access TV show called The EHS Experience that's been on for 15 years. I mean, it was or more actually at this point. It was on when I was still a believer, but after some people at work found out that I was an atheist and I had been writing stories or articles online for various sites, they said, "Hey, have you seen this show?" And I said, "No, why would I want to watch a show with a bunch of people who agree with me saying things that I agree with?" So I just kind of blew it off. And by coincidence or by God's design, Jeff D., who was one of the hosts and co-hosts on the show, lived in the same apartment complex and had put a flyer for the show up on the mailbox, and I happened to see it when I went out to check the mail. I tuned in, I watched, I liked it, I called in, I spoke to them, I got involved with the show, and then I took over and served as president for the next 7 years or so, and am still hosting the show today.
Kind of similar to how Tracy got into it, just started out as a call-in guest and then just got sucked into doing it full-time.
Yeah, Tracy was actually, Dawn had met her and had been encouraging her to get involved, and eventually she did. And boy, are we happy that she did. Tracy's one of my favorite people ever, and the way her brain works, it makes me happy every time she talks.
Right. You said it was already, the show had already existed before you got there. Who originally started it?
So Joe Zemecki and Don Rhodes and some of the ACA members Madeline Mary O'Hare had a public access TV show when the American Atheist was in Austin. And when they left, or when Ellen Johnson took the group to New Jersey, there were some of the people who were left behind formed the atheist community of Austin, and they kind of wanted to distance themselves from Madeline a little bit early on, but the idea of a show was something that everybody liked. And so they started doing pre-recorded shows that they would put up. Eventually it went live. It changed hands several times as far as who was the host. And there were some intermittent periods where there were no shows. But I took over 8 years ago or so. And one of the things that we pushed for was getting it posted online and then eventually live streamed. We were actually doing it before the public access studio had a way of doing it. We just used their internet access and set up a couple computers and started streaming. And that's when the show popularity took off. I'd like to say that, it was a local show, and then I came in and it took off and became international because of me. But actually, it's kind of coincidence that about the same time that I started doing this, we started streaming and posting it on the internet.
Out of all of the shows that you guys have done, what do you think your favorite would be?
Oh boy, I couldn't possibly pick a favorite. There are a few calls that occasionally stick in my head. Actually, I thought last week's call was a long discussion with a woman named Faith. Was actually pretty productive and well done. I don't know if it's my favorite. Some of the funny ones, I have a soft spot for him. The guy who called in and didn't seem to know anything, including why we didn't die when the sun went down. If the sun was the ultimate source of our energy, it's interesting to me to see to watch people think and to make people think. And I guess that's probably one of the reasons why I love doing the show. And so some people that'll call in are intelligent and well-educated and have ideas. And so it's interesting to watch them rethink things. And then there are a handful of people who my heart just breaks for because clearly they know nothing about anything. I mean, it's, look at the trees is their argument for God. And it just, it's kind of sad.
What was it they called that? The argumentum ad arboretum or something like that?
Yeah.
Do you get a lot of people who, you kind of make them question their faith just based on what you guys talk about? Do you get any sort of response from people like that?
Yeah, actually, for everybody who tries to say, oh, debates are useless. I just posted, or somebody just posted my last debate with Cliff Connectley, which is, I like. It's one of, I think, better ones. But we hear a lot of times, oh, this is useless. You can't argue somebody out of something. You can't reason somebody out of something they didn't reason their way into, which I think is absolutely false. I think it's not only is it a give-up move that we've demonstrated is false because I used to believe and I don't, but our inbox is constantly receiving emails from people saying, hey, because of your guys' show or in part because of the show you guys do, I went from being a fundamentalist to an atheist, or now I'm a skeptic, or I used to identify as an agnostic and didn't care much about this, or apathetic. And every single time I go out and do a lecture or debate at a university, if there are atheists present, there are several people who come up and just express gratitude that because that our show contributed in some ways. In some cases it was the primary contributor, in other cases it was just one of many things. So, yeah, there was one guy who emailed and said, he wouldn't tell me his name, but he said, several years ago, I used to call into the show all the time and argue with you, and I thought you were an idiot, and I stopped calling, but I didn't stop watching. And while I won't tell you my name, I'm now an atheist, just too embarrassed so that you don't go back and, look at the calls to see how stupid I was. I tried to talk to him further about it, but he was being a little coy. So yeah, it does work, and we hear from people all the time.
That's great. I have one question I needed to ask for a friend of mine. He wanted to know if you remember the defining moment when you deconverted, what the final straw was that broke the camel's back.
Yeah, no, I don't. I remember the day. My roommate was an atheist, and one of the things that got me going down this path was we had agreed pretty much not to talk about it. I was a believer, he wasn't. We are still best friends, and I didn't want to ruin that, and neither did he, so we didn't talk. But when I started getting serious about possibly becoming a minister, the whole process of getting right with God meant that I needed to be ready to witness to him. And so part of this was, how do you talk to somebody who's an atheist? And just coming to the realization that atheist and non-believer are, pretty much synonymous was eye-opening. But this process of trying to figure out how I would convince him is what led me away, because I had to study what atheists were saying about my beliefs. And there were a number of things where somebody would raise an objection to something that was in the Bible. And I would say, nope, I've read the Bible. I've read it several times now. That's not in there, or it's not in there the way they're saying, or it doesn't mean what they're saying that it means. And in every instance, I was wrong. And that was very eye-opening, but no single one of them ended it. But I do remember the drive home from work. We were working together, my roommate and I, at the same time. And I said, I think I'm kind of agnostic now. And he was like, oh, cool. And that was the end of the conversation. And it was about a week later that I was like, no, I'm an atheist. That's the right label for what my position is now.
Mark, did you want to come in?
Okay, I guess I'll take a question then. It's sort of a... I'm going to check my notes here.
Right.
I actually wrote this last time you were supposed to be on, but you got... what was it? There was a flood or something, right?
There were a lot of delays in scheduling this. I really wanted to be on earlier in the fall, and we had a big flood, which knocked out everything here. And actually, Mark Lowy, the physicist that I reference on the show, he had to be rescued from his roof, and he lived about 3 or 4 miles south of us. And so, in addition to my internet being out, we had to help him. And I thought Cal sent me a message basically, hey, are we still on for Saturday? Because I just announced that they're closing the Austin office and I lost my job and everything. But yeah, we're still here. I'm glad we finally got it done.
Yeah, but let's see. I'm going to see if I can remember the question. Okay, you did mention the whole, why don't we die when the sun goes down and all that. And that's obviously you're aware that a lot of people discover the atheist experience by watching clips like that on YouTube. That's certainly how I discovered it, and I thought it was hilarious. I guess you also know that a lot of viewers, again, myself included, really love it when you end up going, you're done, click. And it's just, this guy is such an idiot, we're done. But I also really love it when there's an actual conversation, and the theist isn't a complete idiot, but there's actually some progress made, and there are these philosophical points. So I guess my question is, what's your take on this? The whole, making fun of, well, not making fun of, but theists looking like idiots, essentially. How do you feel about that? I mean, does it hurt our cause to have, it makes us look bad?
Yeah.
Where,
So there's a couple of different aspects to this. There have been a number of prank callers, and actually one of them has started prank calling the show again. And I've said in the past, I don't mind so much as long as there's some kind of productive discussion, but I would much rather speak to people who sincerely believe what they're saying rather than people who are attempting to parody them. Unfortunately, it's virtually impossible, unless you recognize a voice from a repeat caller, to tell who's being sincere and who's not, because for every just bizarre belief that's out there that somebody could present jokingly, there's probably somebody who believes it. And some of the prank call discussions have been some of the best. The whole Mark from Stone Church thing is a prank caller that went on for ages, and yes, I know that the popularity of some of the clips where there are people who are just boneheadedly ignorant about reality, and the ones where I go on a rant or it gets frustrating, I think there's a place for all of that. And I think it's one of the things that has made the show kind of appeal to people, because you get both. I've said many times that ridiculous ideas are by definition deserving of ridicule. And as long as you strive to ridicule the ideas and not the people, which I don't always succeed at. I mean, there are occasions, you're an idiot. Goodbye. We're all human, and you try doing a show for 8 years where you deal with a lot of that. There's going to be some occasions where you just get frustrated and no, you're done. My favorite moments on the show are anytime I'm actually engaged in a conversation with a caller where they finally acknowledge a point and it's clear that they have thought and made some change or progress or are at least willing to reconsider. And that's why I liked last week's show when Faith called in, because when we raised these issues on a couple of occasions, she said, "Oh, that's a good point. You know, I hadn't really thought about that and I don't have an answer." And she ended, you know, by basically saying that she didn't think this was fair because there were two of us and one of her. And somebody who's a fan of the show said this, that I can't take credit for it. I wish I'd have thought of it at the time. But was it really 2-on-1? Didn't she have God on her side? I mean,
Yeah.
But I love all of it. I mean, I never set out to offend or belittle anybody, but I'm not above doing it. And I think most of the time they end up embarrassing themselves. I think people tend to get about as good as they give on the show. If you come in with this goal of preaching and flaunting your ignorance, I'm going to amplify it and give you that stage to just fall right off. But I think it all works. I think it all works for us. Can it all work against us? Absolutely. There are conversations where I'm quote too soft on people, and there are people who are worried that makes us look bad. And there are conversations where I'm just an arrogant, condescending hard ass that helps them make themselves look stupid. And there are people who think that looks bad for us. And I'm not so much worried about the optics of any individual conversation. I'm kind of looking big picture, get the information out, and make people think. Because I'm not trying to convince the person I'm on the phone with. I'm having this dialogue so the people who are sitting out there who believe what this person believes, who start off the call by saying, "Oh, I'd do so much better if I were to call in," might rethink that. Because we get email like that all the time. "Oh, why do you let the stupid Christians on?" Well, we don't. Why don't you call in? Why don't you have your pastor call in? You know, or do a debate.
I have a question. Why do you think the EHS Experience has become as popular as it has?
Because I'm awesome. No, actually, there's an incredibly good team, and by cycling through co-hosts and changing kind of the tone of the show with each week. And you never know what's going to happen with the calls. Sometimes the show is not very good, and sometimes it's amazing, and I end the show going, "Wow, we really accomplished something today," and that felt good. And I think because it's done live, sports and all, you can watch the hosts and co-hosts as they think these things through and respond, and you can watch the callers as they are hopefully thinking things through and responding. It kind of, I hate to compare it to reality TV because everybody knocks on reality TV, even though everybody's watching it. It's kind of that. I think the appeal of, we are pretty much the underdogs in a lot of places. Skeptics, atheists, the rational thinkers who are standing up in opposition to something that 70 to 80+% of the population tends to believe. And so people would like to root for the underdog and, hey, we've got science and reason on our side. There are people who just watch the show so that they can see a theist make themselves look stupid. And there are other people who watch it so that they can learn how better to engage with their family members, with their friends, so that they don't feel so alone and so that they have better arguments. So the show's so broad that I think that's the appeal, and not for any one person or one thing, because quite frankly, as I've said before, I think in many ways some of the other people on the show, Tracy Harris and others, are better at some of these conversations than I'll ever be.
And do you think the fact that it's a live show, that it leads to interesting moments that wouldn't have happened if it was just a set, scripted show?
Yeah, the bizarre episode where Jeff D and I both did the Eurosolipsist at the same time and caved, which, by the way, we were wrong about in the sense that I don't disagree with obviously the problem of hard solipsism, but that this was both of our reactions at the frustration of dealing with this individual at the same time. It makes for good TV.
Okay, is that everything, Kitch?
I have some questions, but they're not really related. I'll ask them later on in the show.
Okay, we do have a caller lined up, but there was a quick question I wanted to ask Matt there. Do you find now that apologetics, they seem to be focused on nothing? And I mean, you know, in the philosophical sense, kalam and all that, that seems to be the hot potato right now.
Yeah.
Are you getting bored of that yet?
I'm sorry?
So, and, you know, are you getting bored or frustrated continually having to talk about, well, the concept of nothing?
Well, it's there was a period of time where I declared moratorium on Pascal's wager, and basically anybody who was going to call in and present that to the call screener just was disconnected because there was no reason to deal with this just bizarrely refuted 1,000 times argument. The thing I've noticed, though, in the years of doing the show is that they tend to run in cycles. For a while, you'll have Pascal's wager. For a while, you'll have design arguments. For a while, you'll run with Kalam. For a while, we were really focused on the presuppositionalists and tag and things like that. I don't get bored with it because they're each going to present it slightly differently, and it gives us the opportunity to respond to it in slightly different ways. And so somebody who's heard, you know, Kalam and the refutations 100 times might hear something just subtly different that clicks. And so that, you know, I don't, there are some pat answers that I give, but I try to avoid them. And there are a couple of catchphrases, I want to believe as many true things and as few false things, that I'm going to say over and over until it's drilled into everybody's head, because I think that's important. But when it comes to going through the individual arguments, having many different responses increases the chances, I think, of appealing to more people and reaching more.
Okay. All right, we have a caller ready. I hope I pronounced your name right. Junayed, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you perfectly. Yeah, you're on with Matt, so ask your question.
I'm a huge fan of Matt and the show at EHS Experience. I try to watch every recent episode. I had a question for Matt. I live in Bangladesh, and here most of the people are Muslims, and I have to engage in debates with them. While debating with them, many say that the Big Bang Theory was mentioned in Quran. I would like to hear Matt's response to this claim.
Sure, and thanks for calling in with the question. I'm not a physicist, and I'm not a Muslim, and I'm not any sort of expert on the Quran, so take all of this with a grain of salt. The thing that I do say when I address this is I've looked into the claims, and it's not just Big Bang. Muslims are constantly trying to show that the Quran includes all this information about science, that it's scientifically accurate here, that it describes a fetus, that it describes Big Bang. And I don't see it. I can't say that it's false, but what I do see is that we learned about the origins of the universe, to the extent that we understand it at all, through investigation that had nothing to do with the Quran. And nobody who had read the Quran had seen this until after we discovered this scientifically. And so to me, it looks very much like you've got your answer, and now you're going back to make the book fit the answer that you've achieved. And even if it turned out that the books, whether it's the Quran or the Bible or anything else, did include this information, it doesn't do us any good at all until we have verified it scientifically. I don't see any evidence that people were led to Big Bang cosmology by reading a verse and saying, wow, this appears to be a description of the origins of the universe. Let's go out and investigate to see if this claim is accurate, which is what they would have to do. So even if it told you specifically in great detail this information about the Big Bang, you would still have to verify it before the information's any good. Any God would understand that this is the case, and so I don't see why any God would give information in that way, hide it so that you can only discover it after the fact, and it just doesn't impress me, because at the end of the day, it kind of relates back to something I said on Sunday's show about prophecies in the book of Daniel. even if all these things in the book of Daniel were actually prophecies and actually came true, you still could not offer they came true or they were correctly predicted because of a God. And so even if it turns out that the Quran has an accurate description of the Big Bang, you can't tell us why that's true. How do you know that there's not some alien influence or a TARDIS? And I offer these as, pretty much preposterous explanations, but they are all more probable or more identifiably probable than a God because they are not appealing to the supernatural. So the fact that you have a phenomenon, here's a correct prediction, here's a correct model of the universe, doesn't tell you why you have a correct prediction.
Okay,
Okay, thanks for taking my call.
Thanks.
Okay, no problem. Pleasure to have you.
Thank you for calling in.
Okay, guys, there is another caller lined up, so I'll let you fire another question to Matt.
I've got another one. There's a debate coming up, really famous one, I think probably you're aware of, between Bill Nye and Ken Ham. Do you think this is a good idea, or do you think this is just giving Ken Ham far too much attention?
The latter. I think that this is not a good idea. And I've mentioned on Sunday's show, but I'll say it again. I like Bill Nye. I don't know how much formal debate experience Bill has, and I don't know how much formal debate experience he has against creationists. So far, I haven't been able to find that he has any. He is a good science communicator. He is personable, and he might do fairly well. I would have rather seen somebody else engage with Ken Ham because I think this elevates his status, which is why he's doing it. I'm disappointed that this is being done to raise money for the Creation Museum, which is it's in financial trouble, is my understanding. But debates aren't really about who has the best facts. It's more about who can present them the best. And I am very concerned about not the it's not like, oh, Bill goes in and does this debate and he doesn't do a particularly good job, or I don't think we're going to lose rational people over this. And I don't even know that we're going to not be able to convince others. It's just this entire thing smells like crap. And the one, I tried to get somebody to put me in touch with Bill. I know he's, I don't know him personally, but I know he's just working with Eugenie Scott and others to kind of prepare for the debate. But that's preparation on the science end. And I'd really love to have just a 5 or 10 minute call with him to offer just notes about what I've learned in the past few years of doing these debates and the type of things that he might want to include in addition to the science information. And
do you think...
Would you like it? Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to ask, do you think Ken Ham will debate Aaron Ra, someone who is more versed in dealing with creationists? Or do you think that he's just going to avoid that as much as possible until he has no option but to? Even still, I don't think he would.
Aaron and I are really good friends. We actually spoke on the phone about this subject just the other night. Ham's already pretty much refused to debate Aaron. I don't know that it'll ever happen. And now that he's got Bill Nye to agree to this, I think it's even less likely. But I really don't know.
Hey there, Reed. Still trying to connect to him, so Sheila or Marty, you can go next.
Go ahead.
We've lost them all together. I'll try and get the caller.
Oh, tech stuff. Still a ban in 2013, still a ban in 2014.
Yeah. Well, I'm afraid this. If I go on with the questions I've written here, it's gonna take a while. So.
Did Sheila have a follow-up, I guess, a minute ago?
Oh, I just wanted to ask if you were interested in an opportunity to debate Ham.
Oh, I'll debate pretty much anybody, pretty much any time. If I were to debate Ham, there would be some. It would be done very differently. It wouldn't be at his museum set up where he's the one who profits off of it. But you know, I can't do anything about it now. And actually, when it comes to debating creationists, so I debate a lot of topics. I mean, eventually most of them come down to morality, as I've said, but I've also debated, you know, the existence of God and should America be a Christian nation and abortion and other things. When it comes to debating creation versus evolution, I think almost every time I've been asked, I point out that they would be better served talking to Aaron, because he's got so much expertise in this particular area. And I'd like to see him doing more debates. And there are other people in the atheist community that I'd also like to be seen doing more debates, like Jamila Bey, who I know has a lot of skill in the debate arena, and I'd like to see her getting that opportunity a lot more.
And we're still having trouble with the caller.
Yeah, okay. I guess I'll just keep this line of questioning going then. It's easy to get the impression that there's absolutely no point in these debates because it always comes down to who's the better debater. Like you said, it's not about the facts.
Hold on.
So I guess the question then is, what would you say is the point?
Well, JT Eberhard just posted a link to my last debate with Cliff Connectley, and I noticed in the comments over there that somebody had once again said these debates are pointless. And I don't think that that's remotely the case. They get posted on the internet. They educate people. They teach people how to better argue when they engage in these conversations outside of a formal debate. And they do change minds. And, I did a debate in Amarillo, Texas, and we had 700 plus people show up, which for Amarillo is a tiny little town. It was shocking. And at the end of the debate, a young man about, I don't know, I think he was preteen or closing on teen, maybe 10, 11 or something like that, came up and thanked me and said that his parents were atheists, but they had been exposing him to a lot of different views and allowing him to make up his own mind. And he'd been engaged in, participating in church stuff, and they brought him to this debate. And when the debate was over, he said that he was now identifying as an atheist because of what happened at the debate. Now, even if I didn't reach anybody else during that debate, and if it hadn't been recorded, and it is, and it's out there for other people, that'd be enough for me to do it. This idea of thinking globally and acting locally works well in other arenas too. You want to change the world, you can start with one person. And fortunately, with the reach that we've had with the show and the debates, we reached a lot of people. I don't look at them as useless. Even if I didn't love doing it, which I love to do. But I don't understand this, it's pointless. Why? Why is it pointless to share information? How exactly is it that the rest of us, I know there are some lifelong atheists, and Russell's a fourth generation atheist, but even a fourth generation atheist had to at some time evaluate the claims, think them through, and say, yeah, I don't believe that. And without this information available through debates, I don't know how you do that. I think it speaks. I think it's the reason for the incredible rise in the nuns, the NONE nuns, is the internet's access to information and people watching debates.
Yeah, I guess that's a good answer. It's just that the point is there's debates as in formal debates, and there's debates like, let's say, a blog exchange or a video exchange on YouTube or whatever. or people writing books for both sides. Well, someone writing a book for one side, someone responding to that with a book from the other side or something. And then it becomes more about the facts. It's not about, getting the other guy to slip up.
So I see that and I agree with it. This goes back to the room for a lot of different approaches. The thing that I like about having a big public formal debate, I still would, rather, I love engaging on the show and in other arenas. The thing I like about a big formal debate is that, for better or worse, it lends an air of gravitas to the discussion. And the one thing that I offered as a tip to Bill Nye, if anybody wants to point him to Saturday or Sunday show, is that, debates are theater, and I'm very frustrated with most of the debate formats in the I'm going to speak, you're going to speak, I'm going to speak, you're going to speak. It's almost too clinical. And I've tried to inject into debates a direct back and forth, because when I close the debate, I don't just I used to. Nowadays, if you watch the last debate I did, I don't just summarize the facts. I talk about how the two of us addressed the issues and each other. So in the debate with Cliff, my closing remarks were that I hope people can see that Cliff got up and gave a little sermon and didn't address anything I said, and Cliff got up and gave a little sermon and didn't address anything I said, and I took the time to try to respond to each of his. I was being thoughtful. I was not running, from a script or just offering some story, and I was willing to point out that I don't know on occasion. And whereas my opponent, on the other hand, was just asserting that he does know all the time and doesn't offer us any reason or any justification for why he knows. I think there's benefit there. Is it the best thing ever? Are you going to convince everybody? No. And I'm not going to convince Ken Ham or Ray Comfort or Cliff Connectley or anybody that I'm actually debating. I don't expect them to change their mind, and I expect most of the audience will leave with pretty much the same impression they came in with one exception. And that is, I want the audience to be full of Christians. I don't care if there's a single atheist in the audience, actually full of theists, because I want them to never be able to say, I don't know what an atheist is. I've never met an atheist. I have this perception in my head of them. I want to challenge that perception, and I don't want them to say, oh, these people are just, they're not very smart. They don't think. They just want to sin. They don't have any good responses to arguments. I've never seen a thoughtful atheist who was honest and sincere and felt personable or included emotion. They don't get to say that anymore after I'm done, I hope.
We do have a caller lined up. Sorry, Reed, we just couldn't connect to you. I will get to your question later on in the show. Reed, for whatever reason, couldn't connect. But we do have Travis. Are you there, Travis?
Yes, I am. Hello, Earthlings.
Great to have you. You're on with Matt Dillahunty, a fellow Earthling. So ask your question.
Okay. What question? How much time do you all? What I do, I like to attack the theists by explaining that there is no devil, there is no hell, and attacking it from that angle. Nothing to be afraid of, nothing to be safe from. I think that's a really better way of approaching them. What do you think about that?
So, and I apologize because I'm a stickler for phrasing. How did you determine that? How did you determine that there is no devil and that there is no hell?
Determine. I was sitting around thinking one day, and I was a theist, and I thought to myself, if God made everything and God made hell, I don't want to be around anybody making hells. They might make hell 2 or devil plus. And then I was done right there. George Carlin helped me, and maybe a little Joseph Campbell along the way.
Yeah, and I'm completely with you. And the reason that I said that I'm a stickler for phrasing is that what you've just argued is not that there isn't a devil or a hell, but that you don't want anything to do with it. You don't appreciate that. You maybe even that you don't see any good reason to think that it's true. All of which are great arguments that I've made and would encourage others to make. The only reason I pick on the phrasing is when you say things like there is no devil, there is no hell, you've now asserted a positive claim and adopted a burden of proof that you don't need to.
Okay.
It can just be Oh, so you're afraid of hell. Why are you afraid of hell? Why do you think that's real? I don't see any reason to think it's real. Can you prove that I have something to be afraid of? And it tends to back him into this corner. Well, I can't prove that it's real, but what if it is? Well, if it is, I can't really do anything about it, but whoever set that up is a dick. So even if they exist and hell's real, I'm certainly not going to care about worshiping, that God. I don't know. Are you just doing it because out of fear that this idea of might makes right? God can squash you like a bug. Okay, go for it. I can't do anything about it. I'd rather live my life and enjoy it. I see no reason to think it's true, and I certainly don't see any reason to fear it. And if it turns out I'm wrong and I find myself in hell after I'm dead, then I'll sit there comforted by the fact that I'm morally superior to the thug who sent me here, and that I was intellectually honest and had no reason to think that this was a likely outcome.
Yes, I like how Robert Greene Ingersoll approaches the devil. Have you seen his speech on the devil? It begins with the phrase, "If the devil should die, would God make another?"
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ingersoll was one of a handful of luminaries that were critical to my transition out. I absolutely love Ingersoll. Infidels.org has a great historical library where you can access everything that Ingersoll wrote, along with things from Voltaire and Hume. I can't love Ingersoll enough.
Me either.
Anything else, Travis?
Anything else? World peace? You got any? I don't know. No, I don't have too much of anything else. You can check me out on Funny to the Moon.
All right.
We do a podcast as well. So, all right.
Great.
Well,
Will do. Thanks, Travis.
Thanks, Travis.
May the force be with you.
All right, guys. Fire away with some. We have another caller. I'll get a hold.
Is there any new arguments coming out of apologetics, or is it just a cycle of this is a hot topic argument now, we're now going to focus on this hot topic or this hot topic or so on and so on in a continuous cycle? Would that be?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Oh, sorry. Is there any new arguments coming out from apologetics?
No.
Or is it just one continuous cycle?
No, what happens, and this is kind of the amusing thing about the entire process of apologetics is they don't follow the evidence where it leads. They lead the evidence where they want to end up. And so there are no new discoveries. There are no new arguments. What happens is an argument is presented, like the cosmological argument. It gets tossed around. It convinces some people. It gets shot down and poked holes in, and then it gets revised into for example, the Kalam cosmological argument, or a different version of it. Or you might hear a more colloquial version of Pascal's wager, which would be, what if you're wrong, is probably the most frequent one I've ever heard. And so it gets revised and it comes back into fashion, and these things are kind of cyclical. And one of the things that I've tried to point out with this is, okay, it's possible that the original argument was flawed, and you have now fixed the flaws, and you have an argument that is both valid and sound. So let's definitely take a look at it and see where we are. However, if you had this argument that was flawed, why on earth would your next step be to try to reformat that argument? Shouldn't you maybe start over from scratch? Oh, they found this flaw in the argument. We need to fix that. So they'll fix that argument. It used to be the cosmological argument was everything has a cause. And when it was pointed out that, that would include God, it's everything that begins to exist has a cause. Okay, well, let's look at those two arguments side by side. Isn't that just special pleading? Haven't you just excluded your preferred conclusion from this premise, which isn't necessarily a fallacy? I mean, I'm not necessarily pointing this out. I'm talking about the process by which they go. And that is, they already have in mind a conclusion, and they're trying to manipulate an argument to fit it. And what happens is the arguments get more and more obfuscated, which is how you end up with Alvin Plantinga's modal logic version of the ontological argument, which like 0.5% of anybody who's ever lived actually understands that argument at best. And even if it turns out to be valid and sound, what the hell kind of God offers as the best confirmation of its existence a modal logic argument that nobody can understand. None of that makes sense. And the entire process that they're going through of, oh, we need a way to demonstrate philosophically that a God exists, kind of betrays the fact that they can't demonstrate it epistemologically. Yet we're talking about a God that must necessarily be manifesting in reality because all these believers are running around claiming to be little God detectors. God speaks to me, God guides me, God performed this miracle, all these little things, but I can't show you any of that. Instead, I'm going to construct this philosophical little exercise in mental masturbation to make it appear. And the thing is, even if you can't find a flaw in it, that doesn't mean that the argument's sound. And so that's how they win. Let me toss out 23 arguments. You're only going to get a chance to shoot a hole in 5 of them, and a couple of them nobody's going to understand, and it's going to look like I have the weight of the world on my side when I have nothing. It's all smoke and mirrors.
Not really. Well,
No.
kind of.
We'll let
Or
you go
did Casey have something?
Well, we'll let you have your follow-up, Marty, then we'll bring
Yeah.
in Casey.
Yeah, well, one of those arguments that keep coming back every now and then, and it's been mentioned in the chat here a couple of times, the presuppositional thing there, Side 10 Brugenkate's little rant. Do you have a good response to that? Because, I mean, it's so obviously stupid, but it's just that the discussion is over, basically, the second someone brings it up. That seems like the only way to go, because it's just going to be, how do you know that? How do you know that? How do you know that? Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So Sai had agreed to debate me like a year and a half ago or so, but was forever too busy, as was his little buddy Eric. And we even tried to set up a 2-against-1 debate, which they turned down. Because I guess they were busy. I'm not necessarily claiming that they're ducking me, but I'm not gonna come in and necessarily talk trash about the two of them. And the presuppositional stuff is kind of complicated to get into. I'd want to look at what their actual formulation was, but this nonsense of how do you know that? How do you know that? How do you know that? Is basically a way of leading back to the inevitable conclusion that we have no solution to hard solipsism. We don't know that we're not a brain in a vat, but it doesn't matter one bit. I am stuck interacting with the reality that I perceive, whether it's the ultimate reality or not, until such time as somebody demonstrates that a way out. I'm stuck in the matrix until I know I'm in there. And while you can say that ultimately there's a flawed foundation at the basis of this, and you would be right, thus the problem of hard solipsism, it doesn't matter a bit. Because even when I'm in the matrix, until somebody points out a way out or a way to deal with it, I still got to follow those rules, and everything that I experience points to these things being true. That if you put a gun in my head with a bullet in it, pull the trigger, it's going to blast a hole through my head, and I'm probably going to die. I'm not going to be able to dodge it, superhero style. The presuppositionalists are doing actually two things in the same vein. One is that they're just presupposing God, which is utterly dishonest. And they're doing so by trying to claim that, you can't have logic and reasoning if there isn't any God. And yet they have no way of proving this. At best, they can come up with a misdefinition of reasoning, a misapplication of reasoning, and then say, my magical logic being solves that problem, which is the same thing that they've done with the cosmological arguments of, here's this potential gap or something we can't comprehend, and so my panacea-like God hypothesis fits it. Well, so does a universe-creating pixie, and so does a logic-creating pixie. You have defined this thing into existence to fill the gap in something you don't understand. That doesn't prove that it exists, and it certainly doesn't get you from there must be a God to Jesus is God and died, for me. So I'd love to actually debate them at some point. I don't think it's going to happen. And I think the presuppositional stuff has tailed off in the last year. I think we're back to Kalam and, as Cal pointed out, the nothing stuff, which is equally frustrating. But
yeah, I've got a video where one of those arguments is going on in the comments. I just can't be bothered to get involved with it. But it's one thing that keeps coming up is that nothing would have to imply that there are no laws. And if there are no laws, then nothing can come out of anything, blah, blah, blah. The whole point being that in nothing, there are no laws. That sounds kind of like a law to me.
There's two people who've responded to this far better than I have. One is Scott Clifton, who's on YouTube, is Theoretical Bullshit, and the other one's Tracy Harris, who, while I'm sitting there struggling with finding a way to explain this, and I think that's one of the things that I've tried to do, because I am admittedly undereducated. I am the everyman atheist to some extent. I've been pretty good at explaining things in ways that almost anybody could understand, but I fail at some points. And Tracy was sitting on the show and just said, okay, is there a nothing that you can investigate in order to determine these things that you're claiming about nothing? I don't even see how that is possible or makes any sense. And it should have been so obvious to me, because we use the same argument with regards to the origins of the universe. Do you have another universe that you can investigate to show what a non-designed universe would look like? Because we recognize design by contrast, not by complexity. And
Same thing with the fine-tuning argument.
Yeah.
How, do you have another universe to compare it to where the laws of physics are different?
Yeah.
Okay, we can head over to the caller and welcoming back occasional co-host of ours. Casey, are you there?
Oh, yes, I am.
And you're calling from a funny place called Texas, aren't you?
Yes. That is about how many miles from Austin?
I have no idea.
How far are you
Actually,
from us?
Well, I technically live in Dallas, so...
It's
well,
at
you
least
know...
3.5 hours.
Okay, yes, that is pretty far.
All right, what's your question, Casey?
All right. There is this one thing I was reading on a Wikipedia, of all places. Basically, it says that according to some studies, what happened? This is on the criticism of religion page. It's like, according to some study, well, maybe it's a survey. Yeah, it was a survey. What happens is, it says that, well, people that are religious are happier and less stressed than the non-religious folk. And this is like, these are surveys by Gallup, National Opinion Survey, National Opinion Research Center, and Pew Organization.
Yeah,
and then
studies like that.
What do you say to those?
Yeah, my favorite is, and I wish I could source it. It's somebody had mentioned that the fact that a drunk is happier than a sober person.
Oh yeah, I've heard that quote. In fact, I think I can get the book right now if you give me a sec.
Yeah, my thing is, I don't know the study's methodology. I don't know that it's true or false. We've said many times, or it's been said that ignorance is bliss. And I think, what we've seen, from Mormons, which I'll use as an example, there are Mormons who are absolutely miserable and oppressed, and their life is shit, and yet they are encouraged by the church at all times to portray a positive image and act as if they are happy, so that they don't do damage to the reputation of the church. There are other individuals who, I would imagine it would make you very happy to be confident that this life is just a place to wipe your feet, and that no matter what bad thing happens to you, you're going to end up in paradise with Jesus forever, that this would be, something to let you not stress over the potentially harsh nature of reality. But I don't care. I'd much rather deal with reality on reality's terms I'd rather make sound decisions based on good information rather than live my life blissfully ignorant of reality and leaning on this idea that I'm going to happy land when I die. So to the extent that they might be happier, I'm not sure how they're quantifying happy, and I'm not sure that it's actually accurate. I just lost my job on Thursday. They announced that they're closing the Austin office, and they laid all of us off. There were moments where that was devastating. But I have kind of trained myself to look at the positive and see what I can get out of this. And every time I've lost my job, it has worked out for the better in the long run. There's no guarantee that it will this time. But I think it's a trend with how I deal with it. And so while I might be happier on some scale, if I were religious, I don't care for that scale. I love being who I am, addressing reality with intellectual honesty and curiosity, and taking the bad with the good.
Yeah, I've had the same. I've thought the same thing whenever I see all those studies. Well, with those surveys. Well, I have learned there was a time where I took those things as, well, very legit. But then you have to remember, surveys aren't really all that. You have to be careful if you're going to use surveys as, well, just as a sole fact of lifestyle, because, well, for one thing, you don't even know how they define things like happiness, or as it says right here, basically saying that they're less that religious are more are less likely to have depression, suicidal thoughts, behavior, and drug and alcohol abuse.
This has come up in debates. As a matter of fact, I think Cliff mentioned it in the last one, which is this claim that atheists have a higher rate of suicide. It may or may not be true. I do know quite a few atheists who have kind of stumbled into nihilism and depression over the eventual end of their existence. The fact that religious people don't deal with this or don't necessarily have to deal with this struggle in the same way is largely irrelevant to me. I think what we can do is treat and teach much better. These people have had religion pulled out from underneath them in many cases, and have had nothing as far as education and treatment to deal with these situations. Because it's possible to teach people to deal with those situations, and it's entirely likely that they could be happy and almost certainly better off with the right tool set. And so if you've been lying to somebody for their entire life saying, oh, when you're 18, you're going to inherit $1 billion. When you're 18, you're going to inherit $1 billion. And they get to 18 and they don't have $1 billion. Yeah, that could be really depressing. But if instead you give people the tool set to live their life responsibly, not like they're going to be a lottery winner, I would think that, they might be much better off in dealing with life.
Yeah, but yeah, cause I think that maybe they could do that the humanist institute and all that. Well, I think they have many things to offer. Well, for advice, perhaps.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Is that everything, Casey?
What?
Is that everything for the time being?
Well, actually, I do have one more thing I would like to address. All right. Then, I remember this other study that was done. Apparently, well, places that are highly, highly religious, like, the U.S., apparently they support science more compared to the secular countries like Europe, who are skeptical about scientific progress as it describes. And this was on This is another thing there was another thing I found on, well, discovered on Wikipedia. Of course, I think the study was done by Oxford. Sorry.
I kind of want to take a look at that because it's a little counterintuitive considering the battles we've got between religion and science.
Yes, true that.
Everything, Casey.
Not about that. I'm not too sure.
Okay,
That's,
we'll go to Kitch then.
and I wasn't on, but I don't think I fully understood. Is that I wonder how they would have measured that. Is it through scientific funding, or is it through surveys about questions on scientific topics? That's my question.
Yeah, I agree. We kind of need more information about that because the U.S. has problems with science funding.
Yes,
which
I know that.
is part of what makes that kind of counterintuitive to me. And it could be that some of those other secular nations are actually doing more in the arena of social work, and they're working towards more equality, better benefits, and a better life for people currently than striving for scientific innovations. The landscape here is so complicated. What makes the determination of what's a better life and how should we best spend our money is probably something we'll argue forever. I just think we need to keep doing more in both, and probably quite a bit less. I don't want to go into the less military spending, because there's still problems in the world that unfortunately you need a military for. But as far as this study, I can't comment on it other than I would want to know more.
If you want to know where it came from, it's like the culture of science, how the public relates to science and across the globe. That's the name of the book, if you wanted to know. Well, according to Wikipedia.
Yep, I got it now.
All right, that's cool.
I don't think that I'm trying to simply just use Wikipedia as my biggest source. I just ran across. The only reason why I reference is because that's where I ran across the source.
Okay. Who wants to? There's a chat room question I've got up in the Skype chat. So, Kitch, you've volunteered. Forward first.
Grand. I'm just. My Skype is crazy. This is from Nemo Utopian. Is it a unwanted assumption by apologists that God and nihilism are incompatible? Even if there was a God, would it actually deliver the objective meaning they yearn for?
Yeah, not necessarily.
Or could he just be a meaningless brute force fact?
Yeah, it's one of those things where when somebody offers an argument for the existence of God, when William Lane Craig offers Kalam, and he starts with Kalam as basically a demonstration in his eyes that there must be this creative force out there that he's going to call God. Even if it were correct, there's no guarantee that God isn't outright evil, or that God didn't cease to exist after it created the universe. Maybe it blew itself up in some big creative event. And so, God isn't necessarily a solution for nihilism or anything else, because we don't have enough. We have no reason to think that there's any God, let alone a specific God, let alone the specific God that solves these problems. This is something a trap we all fall into. Like earlier when I talked about wanting to fill the audience with Christians, when I really should have said theists, because I want believers of all stripes to rethink what they believe and why. We do this all the time as well when we talk about God. When we first hear somebody says, I want to prove to you that God exists, we make assumptions about what they mean by God. And typically we make those assumptions in accordance with the other people that we've interacted with and what gods they want to talk about. And they do the same thing. They assume that when they say, I'm going to prove you God exists, that you're already talking about the same God. And there's almost certainly you're not. Almost certainly the term is so ill-defined that you can't be sure that you're talking about anything even close to the same thing.
Okay, anyone have a follow-up there?
Nope.
All right. Okay, there is. This was the question the caller earlier.
Oh.
Matt earlier asked. Marty, you can read it.
Yeah, okay. I was going to ask what atheists in college can do to debunk religious ideas. I go to a Bible study once a week with some Christians and I want to save them from their theism. Well, that's an interesting way of putting it.
So be yourself, be out. One of the best things you can do is to let people know that they actually know an atheist and that you're not some evil being bent on the destruction of the universe. Ask lots of questions. I'm a huge fan of using the Socratic method to help lead people to their own conclusions as opposed to just hammering them over the head with facts or opinions or citing research. And reach out to others through Secular Student Alliance. Build a group, build a community. Just your presence alone, your obvious acknowledged presence, is already quite a bit. Being willing to engage is another part of this. Their student groups have done a lot of different things, and some of them come under fire. Down at Texas State, they did Bibles for porn, basically in a smut for smut campaign. You come drop off your Bible, and we'll give you some porn. And there were some people who said, "Oh God, that's just horrible. Why would you do that?" I liked it.
Yeah, the Bible's full of porn.
I thought it made a good point. Is it the only point we need to make? No. Is it necessarily the best first approach to everybody? No. But what it did was it made everybody aware that there's a Secular Student Alliance there, and that group has gone on to work with other Christian groups on campus to bring debates and discussions and cooperate on different things. It's kind of like going back to talking about discussions on the show. There's no single call that sums up the show that says, oh, Matt is this, or Tracy is this, or this conversation is the example of how things are always done. I think there's room for a broad range of responses and actions. But the most important thing is to make people know that you're here. You know, as soon as they realize that their friends, their neighbors, their doctors, the person who picks up the trash, that all these people don't necessarily believe the same thing that they do, that's eye-opening.
I have a quick question. The Satanist monument, and I can't remember the name of the state that's recently gone up.
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma.
It hasn't.
Okay. Do you think that is a good strategy, though, or do
Absolutely.
you think that...
It's one of my favorite things that's happened currently, and briefly, as briefly as possible, I'll tell you why. We shouldn't have these monuments on public land in the United States. It is a violation of church-state separation. If you take a look at what JT's been reporting about what's going on in Mountain Home, Arkansas, where you've got this judge who say, hey, if we let them, we've got this nativity scene, if we let them put up their winter solstice banner, we'll have to let everybody put everything up. Yes, that's exactly it. That's what we've been saying. There is no equitable solution to allow everybody to permanently put fixtures on public land representing their beliefs, which is why the Ten Commandments monument down here on the Capitol grounds should never have been allowed to stay, because it puts them in the position of either picking one religion over another or polluting the landscape with nothing but religious monuments to everybody's personal little beliefs. And since we couldn't get them to realize this and take it down, I love the fact, as much as I, depending on which Satanist group, or what your particular Satanist group believes, I may be completely on your side, because they don't actually buy the supernatural, most of them. It's about hedonism and selfishness, and some of that I don't really have that much of a problem with. But I love the fact that they did this, because this is going to be an outrage to a lot of people. How dare you put up a statue of Baphomet with a couple of kids standing in front of them next to my Ten Commandments? This is God's country, damn it. This is going to continue to create a little shitstorm that I hope causes people to say, you know what? No more. And the example that I used was, if I share a house with three other people, I'm an atheist, we've got a Christian, a Muslim, and a Satanist. We've each got our own bedrooms, and in our own bedrooms, we can pretty much do whatever we want. There are limits, because noise and smoke and smells and other stuff aren't contained entirely in your room. But for the most part, you can do what you want in your room. But the living room area that we all share, you don't get to put up permanent fixtures in the living room. You can still come and have your Bible study in the living room as long as we can agree on a time to do it and a time limit so that, we're sharing this space. You can have your Bible study in the living room. But just in the same way that my Christian roommate wouldn't want the Satanist roommate to put up a big painting of Satan in the living room that's going to be there when he wants to do his Bible study, the Satanist doesn't want the Christian putting up a big crucifix that's going to be there when he has his party downstairs, and I don't want either of them. And it's not a matter of being offended. Nobody has a right to not be offended. This isn't about offense. This is about equality and the law in the United States.
I find it odd with the Ten Commandments that people who are advocating for this don't see the obvious violation of the separation of church and state, when the first 4 commandments are pretty much you have to believe in this God or you will, basically implied, you will go to hell.
It is.
And that's kind of really off-putting for people who aren't in that religion.
Yeah, it's privilege blindness is what it is. They are the majority religion. They are used to getting things done their way, and any infringement upon what they perceive to be their right is just, oh my gosh, they cannot see the privileged position that they're in, and this shines a big old fat flashlight right on it. A big red lens, demon-carrying flashlight onto their privilege.
Okay. You've got a question from the chat.
Yes, I do. This one's from Cosmo Creamer for Matt. It's a 2-part question. First, what do you do when you run into a street preacher or anyone in the public proclaiming their religion? Have you ever had to debate anyone on the street? And if so, how did that turn out?
So I have a fondness for engaging with street preachers. I've done it in New Orleans on Bourbon Street with the nut jobs that are standing out there with a cross and a megaphone. I've posed for pictures with them and had debates with them right there on the street. And I've done it here in Austin. I don't always stop. It depends on what I've got going on. And I don't just march right over to them and go, you're wrong, and blah, blah, blah. Most of the conversations have begun with, I used to believe what you believe, but I don't anymore. And that gets them to ask questions, and we have a discussion. I love doing it.
If I could just say something quickly here. I'm not exactly accustomed to running into street preachers in Sweden, but it has happened. And the thing about it is I'm so interested in following religious discussions online that I figured that if I got to actually have a conversation with someone like that would be really interesting. But every time it's happened, it's just not now. I'm catching a bus. Come on, or I'm supposed to be in class in 10 minutes. And it's just it's so annoying because you almost have to be rude to them, and I feel like that's a tactic they're using. Like there's no polite way to walk away. You know what I mean? They're trying to put you into that position where you have to be rude in order to get away from them.
I've on a couple occasions I've just said, no thanks, and just keep on walking. Yeah. One thing I don't do, and I feel it's kind of important to address this, is that we're talking about people, out on the street who are actively trying to engage people and have conversations and witness to them and stuff. The campus preachers who get a soapbox and a megaphone and evidently get permission to stand out there on campus and preach. What I don't do is I don't stand there and heckle them, and I don't try to engage them. But I will stand there and probably smile and smirk until they directly ask me something, and then it's fucking on. And we'll have a good time from there.
Yeah.
In Dublin, there are street preachers around O'Connell Street, and they're not really like the American ones. They're more of the college ones that Matt just brought up. They're just there with a microphone, just yelling Bible verses. And in fairness, they're Christians, they've been Muslims, etc. They're pro-life as well. And I would hate to think what happened if I actually did catch them, because this is the city centre, this is town. Usually when I'm in there, I'm usually there buying something, going shopping. So I'm going to be stressed. So it wouldn't end well for that kind of thing, especially if you're yelling at me through a microphone.
Yeah.
Sorry, we have a chat room question from Dutch Liam, and it's to Matt. If you could choose a field of science to study, which one would it be and why?
Probably neuroscience, because I'm fascinated with not just how the brain works, but what we can learn from it. There's this issue of identity and self that ends up being at the core of conversations about the soul, about free will. If I were to dig into a hard science, I think that'd be it, because I love listening to guys like Ramachandran talking about mirror neurons and things like that. And, while Sam Harris and I are going to occasionally disagree on something, there's no doubt that he's brilliant. I've loved how he's kind of gotten involved with this. And Dennett is probably one of my biggest heroes and inspirations. And while he's a straight up philosopher, he is digging in to this intersection between philosophy and things like neuroscience. So that'd probably be it.
Casey?
Oh yeah, the one problem I have with Harris is he is very, well, let's just say he is not unlike a BNP activist, especially when talking about Muslims.
I don't know if you're aware, Matt, they're an extreme right-wing party in the US. Just say, Harris, he can come across out Islam and Muslim.
Yeah, and so can Pat Condell. I know there's a lot of discussions about this. I don't really tend to follow all of them. I got tired of some of the drama and the complaining a year or so ago, and have just pretty much been focused on doing my thing. Still, all of these people, even if I end up disagreeing with them, and I've disagreed with every single person that I've ever met. I mean, Richard Dawkins and I have had several conversations over dinner and stuff, and there's things we disagree on. He was here when I was going to do my debate on abortion. We disagreed on the best way to address it, and it doesn't matter one bit. I'm much more interested in focusing on the areas where we agree and where we can work together to get stuff done. And inevitably, for most of these people, where we disagree, really not a big deal. I've got bigger fish to fry when 70% of the population believes something that is just patently ridiculous. And that's even before we get into how many are believing in a young Earth, geocentric, God-guided everything, literal 7-day creation. I mean, and what they're trying to do to textbooks.
Oh yeah, that reminds me of another quote I once heard. Okay, it was shown that in Iceland, what happened, many of the citizens there believe in fairies, elves, and all that. I'm sure Marty is aware of this, are you?
I don't know where you're going with it, but...
All right, here's where I'm going with this. It's shown that, I'm not sure if the numbers are like 50%. 50 or so of the population believes in it. Then it says, but if you think that, before you laugh at Iceland, just remember, 43% of the U.S. believes the Earth was created in 10,000 years ago. There are more people in the U.S.
Yeah.
There's something I've found, though, as it becomes more secular with Martin Kutch, there's a lot kind of heading over to New.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, do you find that in the States as well? Maybe some people have come out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things.
Sorry, you carry on, Matt. Sorry.
One of the things we keep pointing out is that atheism and skepticism are two different things, and not every atheist is a skeptic, and not every atheist is an atheist because they have applied skepticism. There are people who are atheists for bad reasons, and one of the problems is that And I've said before, it's silly for atheists to congratulate themselves for getting the correct answer to literally what I think is the easiest question in the universe, which is, do we have any good reason to think that there's a God? No. But they get this elevated impression of, oh, I've cracked it while these other people haven't. And it sets up a bias where they sometimes think they can't be wrong about these other things. And yeah, we see a lot of New Age stuff and psychic stuff and ghost shows and Bigfoot shows and just, ancient aliens all over the TV. And these are popular shows. And I'm, while I wasn't, if you told me somebody was going to remake Cosmos, I would have thrown a little fit saying, no, don't. I'm encouraged by the fact that Neil deGrasse Tyson is the one doing it. At least I'm more confident in his ability to do it than anybody else's. We need more of that, and I'd actually rather sit around and watch straight up biology shows about nature than ever turn on another Paranormal State or any kind of crap like that. That's just, people are citing this as if it's science. Oh, I saw it on TV the other night. Well, I read it on the internet. Okay, my Uncle Bernie told me. How the fuck do you know? I mean, this is just bizarre that, oh, of course there's no God, but the aliens are trying to communicate to us, or it just drives me nuts.
All right. Casey's got his hand up.
Oh, yes. I feel you so much. And about the New Age thing, I live in that household. I'm always having to be told, you should try this herbal crap or whatever, or like other things having to do with New Age, like aromatherapy, all of that. Gets annoying. And also about the educational shows being replaced with things like aliens and other shit. Well, the other problem is it's not only that they're being dedicated to paranormal things, they're being dedicated to, you guessed it, rednecks.
Hey, now, you're talking to not only a redneck, but somebody who has recently spoken about how rednecks should be the atheist movement's target audience. The world is right. I think fundamentalists are more eager are more ready for plucking than liberal theologians, because they are on such rigid ground. You knock out one little thing and everything starts to fall. The other thing is that I like all kinds of music, including country music, and I am sick to death of shit like Jesus Take the Wheel. And I want to see some of because there are godless heathens in country music right now who are doing religious music because that's what it takes to get you sold in Nashville. And I'd like to see a world where there's as many out atheist country music stars as there are rock and rolls. I am about quarter redneck on my grandfather's side,
Don't worry, I'm a redneck. I'm technically born from a redneck family too.
But you're talking about the UFOs. I actually had a productive email exchange with somebody because I've continued to use this example about the reliability of the Gospels by saying you can actually go talk to people right now, living, breathing people who will tell you their story about their alien abduction, and yet we don't tend to believe them. And curiously, if you take this and make them anonymous and set it back 2,000 years, all of a sudden it becomes more plausible. These Gospel authors, we don't know who they are. We have no way of confirming it. They have a more outrageous claim, and this more outrageous claim is attested to by worse evidence and worse testimony, or less reliable testimony, less investigatable testimony, and yet suddenly it's more believable. And somebody took me to task on it who was accepting a bunch of this stuff about aliens, and we had a back and forth, and the last email he sent me, I just pulled it up. It says, thank you. It seems I've been jumping to a conclusion that's not supportable. You're right. None of the evidence I cited seems to point towards alien abductions, though I think I'm correct in saying that they point toward a phenomena that's affecting people that currently has no reasonable explanation. And I'm not sure that there's no reasonable explanation. I'm just sure that the explanation that it's most likely that these people are actually being abducted isn't supported by sufficient evidence.
Oh, yeah, and also, speaking of UFOs, I do have, in British terms, an auntie who is in East Texas, who believes in who believes in all those UFOs, even claims to have seen one. But of course, moving on from UFOs, she also on to Sasquatch. She also buys into that Sasquatch stuff because, well, in fact, do you want to know one thing about those the other things are Sasquatch conventions? I remember my aunt was gonna bring me to one, and well, one thing about those guys, I think that they know that they don't have any good evidence to support them, you know, and the reason why I figured this out is because they censor. If you say anything in opposition of their evidence, they will throw you out, is what I was told. So that's why I never attended. I was like, hey, why should I go to something that's going to suppress my freedom of opinion? Or actually, fact. Because, yeah,
Casey, we're running out of time right now, so we really need to wrap up. Sorry to interrupt you.
That's all right.
Okay, like I say, we're just coming up to the last 3 minutes, so as always, we like to give the guests a little bit of a soapbox moment. Matt, if there's anything you want to announce, shout out right now, you're free to do so. Final thoughts. Matt?
Yeah, there was some kind of bandwidth issue slowdown, so I'm not sure what I was asked.
All right, sorry, it's just we're coming up to the end of the show, and we usually just let the guests have a quick soapbox moment. So your final thoughts, please, Matt, or anything you want to promote and shout out.
Oh, I've got enough of a soapbox. Just thanks for having me on and asking questions. Obviously, I don't even know what I want to promote right now. Just keep encouraging people to come out and be out and get involved and have more discussions because, you know, my friend Keith Lowell Jensen, who's a brilliant comedian, had this bit that he's done where he has everybody at the audience at a atheist or skeptic event. You know, raise your hand if you used to be religious, and hands are going up all over the place. And, you know, okay, now how many of you were, well, his response is that to the people who say that it's not worth talking to these people, I think we were fucking worth talking to. We were all deserving of this. And I couldn't have got from where I was to where I am if it weren't for the efforts of people like Richard Carrier and the guys at infidels.org putting information up there. Obviously, you know, my transition was before YouTube, but I've benefited from the thoughts of pretty much everybody. People try to quote me all the time. It happened twice in the last 24 hours on Twitter. And I have to keep telling them, yeah, I may have said that, but I have no idea if it's original to me. I mean, you know, I heard it somewhere else. I'm just spreading information, and if people find it useful, that's great. And I probably won't quit until everybody tells me to stop.
It's been great, Matt. I'll just go around the panel as always for the last. Marty, your final thoughts, please.
Yeah, it was great to have you back on the show, Matt. That's about it, I think.
Any announcements you want to make, Marty, you can do them right.
No, not really.
All right, Sheila.
All right, I just want to say, I know that we're kind of somewhat connected through other people, but it was good to finally get a chance to talk to you. I guess in addition to being here, you can find me on A News, and or follow me on Twitter, I guess, at Sheila Blackadder.
Okay, and Kitch.
Yeah, it's been great to have you on again. It's a very interesting show, and just we're all grateful to you taking the time to come on to the show.
All right, and anything you want to shout out? Well, you're back making videos now on YouTube.
Yes, I'm back making videos now on YouTube. I cleared out my old videos because I just didn't like them anymore, and I just felt that I needed a fresh start. So I will be making a new video series about colloidal silver and about the harm and about the pseudoscience about colloidal silver and the colloidal silver home kits, because that's kind of been bugging me the last couple of months.
Yeah.
Just seeing the bad science and that.
Yeah.
So
It's the alternative medicine.
Oh, Matt's got his hand up now. You may answer.
Yeah, I know I had my time for goodbye, but I wanted to say thank you because I just looked over and checked Twitter, and there's a bunch of people who are tweeting at Bill Nye to have him get in touch with me. I don't know if he will or not.
All right.
But thanks so much for doing it because
Well, he
That'd be fun.
Well, he did one time come over to Texas. I mean, he went to Arlington, which is not that far from me, because he wanted to do a lecture over at the Arlington University.
All right. Casey, final thoughts there.
It's nice talking to you again, and it's too bad that we live in the biggest state in the U.S. because otherwise we would just be able to pass by each other on a regular basis. But again, everything's bigger in Texas, even the miles.
All right, just a few quick announcements. Sheila and Wolfie have now taken control of basically the social media side of Tool. So, you guys are in charge of that now, aren't you?
Yeah.
Kind of just you've fallen into it by
Yeah.
default. And also, just to let everyone know, the website has now just had 1.5 million hits over the past year, which is fantastic. Great news. We're also nearly approaching 30,000 downloads for the show. Everything's going great. So thanks everyone for following it. You can subscribe to the podcast, everything. Just go down below there. The show is usually uploaded within about 48 hours. We send it to our editor who makes it sound even nicer than it already is. And the video will be uploaded to the YouTube channel that's listed down below. So everyone, thanks for the turnout, and we'll see you all next week. And our special guest then will be Abby Smith of the ERV blog, which I know Kitch is looking forward to very much. That's in your field of study, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, sort of. Yeah.
Sort of, yeah. But I'm looking forward to it. So, yep, a fun week of reading ahead of me as well. So.
Right. Okay, everyone. Thanks very, very much for the turnout. And I know there's a few questions that came out at the end that we didn't get to Matt, but I'm pretty sure if I email them to Matt and if you give me your email, I'll be happy to answer them.
I will be happy to do my best. I have 6,879 unread emails in my inbox, but I'll keep an eye out.
Or I could send them through to you on Skype, or so we'll figure out a way you can get to those questions. Hopefully you can. So again, a big thanks to Matt, and thanks to everyone for turning out, and we shall see you same time next week. Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Night.